So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at equations that may not be in the standard form. They may be what's called general form. We're going to learn how to rewrite them into standard form. It will use one of our concepts from last year in Algebra 1 called completing the square. We use that to rewrite standard form of a quadratic into vertex form of a quadratic. So general form is going to look like the equation on the left or some sort of variation of that. So x squared plus y squared plus ax plus by plus c equals 0. But you might have like parts of that on the right side of the equation that can be mixed around and jumbled up. So what you're going to want to do though is first start grouping things together. So your first step is to put the x's together. So you're going to do x squared plus ax. And you're going to leave a blank space after the ax. Then you're going to add the y squared and the bx, and you're going to leave a blank space after that by. And then equals, you're going to have your constant over to the right side, and you're going to have two blanks after that. If you were at Milton last year for Algebra 1, this should definitely look familiar. All right, so the next task is to try to figure out what goes in those four blank spaces. And what's nice is that really there's only two steps to do that. So the number that goes after the ax right here will also go after the c. Those will be the same numbers because if you add something to the left side, you must add something to the right side. So that's just balancing it. And then the same thing goes for what you add to the by. You're going to add the same thing over on the right side. So to find that number, what you're going to do is you're going to take the a value, right? You're going to divide it by 2, and then you're going to square it. And that is going to be the number that goes after the ax and after the c. Then you're going to do the same thing with the b value. You're going to take the b value, cut it in half or divide by 2, and square it, and then you'll add that number as well. All of these numbers should be positive numbers because when you square something, it will become positive. After you do that, you are going to factor the x squared plus ax plus a over 2 squared. I know it sounds weird right now because I'm just giving you a bunch of letters. There will be numbers and it'll make a little bit more sense. It will look like x plus a over 2 squared. Same thing with the y squared plus by plus b over 2 squared. It will end up looking like, and there's a typo right there, that should say y plus b over 2 squared. And then you are going to combine these three numbers on the right side, and I'll just give you a single number. And then once you do that, you will be in standard form. So you will then have your center, HK, and your R, you'll have R squared, which means you can find the radius. So I know that looking at these steps, that might seem kind of overwhelming and it may look very confusing, but let's try it with some examples so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. All right, so we're going to convert x squared plus y squared minus 4y minus 4x plus 8y minus 5 equals 0 into standard form, and then we're going to identify the center and the radius. Okay, so step 1 is just grouping things together, just getting the format right. So I'm going to keep my x squared. I want my x squared and my negative 4x to go together. They're on the same side of the equation, so I'm just moving them around. I don't have to change the signs. Then I'm going to put a blank space after that negative 4x. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the y squared. So I've got a y squared and an 8y together. They're on the same side of the equation, so I don't need to change anything. And then I'm going to leave a blank space after that. My constant of negative 5 needs to move to the other side. So to move it, I would have to add it, which means it's going to flip to be a positive. And then I'm going to make sure that I have my blank space on the after that 5 to represent the value that I'm going to add to the x's, and then also that space to represent the value that I'm going to add to the y's. So now we're going to find that number in that blank space. And this can be a mental step. I'm probably going to write it for the first couple ones, and then I'll start doing it mentally. So to find that number, we're going to take the negative 4x, the a value. All right, we are going to take negative 4, we're going to cut it in half, which would be negative 2, and then we're going to square it. And negative 2 squared is 4. So I'm going to put that number in both of these blue spots, because if I add 4 to the left side, I have to add 4 to the right side. I'm going to do the same thing with the 8 in front of the y. So I'm going to take 8, I'm then going to divide it by 2, which is 4, and then I'm going to square it, which is 16. And I'm going to put 16 in both blanks. Okay, and it's hard for you guys to understand, like, why would you do that? But the way that this works is it forces it to look and factor how standard form factors it. Okay, so we've done the hard work. The next step is just to really rewrite the equation. So I'm going to focus on this part right here, just the x's. Okay, last year we talked about factoring and unfoiling, which is a huge concept. You know, we listed out the factors of x squared and the factors of 4, and then we found that perfect combination to make it factor. The nice thing about this method is it will always factor the same way. So it's going to be x, and you're going to have your square on it. To find that middle number, all you're doing is taking half of that b value, which is negative 2. Okay, so right here, when you took half of b, before you squared it, that's the number that goes right there. Same thing on the y side. We know it's going to be y, and we know it's going to be squared. To find that number, we look at our b value, which was 8, and we half it, so that was positive 4. And then on the right side, we're going to add 5 and 4 and 16, which is going to be 25. So if you look at it at this stage right now, this is that standard form that we practiced writing the previous day. So now you have everything you need to identify the center and the radius. Okay, so our center, remember that it's going to be the opposite of what it appears. So it looks like negative 2, positive 4, but it's actually 2, negative 4. Okay, we're looking at the h and the k, but it's got to be the opposite. The radius, this 25, is r squared. So we're going to have to take the square root of that number, and the square root of 25 is 5. That one works out nicely. All right, let's try another one. So again, the first step is all about rearranging. So let's get our x's together. Our x's and y's are all on the same side, so you're not going to have to change any signs for this. You just need to regroup them, reorder them. All right, so let's put our x's together. So we've got x squared minus 2x. Remember to leave that space. Now let's put our y's together. Plus y squared plus 6y, and then your space, equals our constant of negative 10 needs to get moved to the right side, so we're going to add 10, so that's going to make it positive 10. And then we need our balance of the numbers that we're adding on the left side to the right side. Okay, so now we're ready to find those numbers. So to find the first number, we are going to take the a value of negative 2. We're going to cut it in half, which is negative 1, and we're going to square it, which is positive 1. And we're going to do the same thing for the b value. Take 6, cut it in half, which is 3, and 3 squared is 9. Add it to both sides. Now we're ready to factor. So x, to find the number that you add or subtract to x, you're just doing half of that a value. So half of that a value is negative 1 squared plus y. Half of the b value was positive 3 squared equals, and then just combine your three numbers on the right. 10, 1, and 9 is 20. So that is our equation in standard form. To get our center, we're going to look at the h and k value. Remember that they are the opposite. So that would be 1, -3. To get the radius, we will look at 20, which represents r squared. And so we're going to have to take the square root of 20. The square root of 20 in exact is 2√5. And as a decimal, that would be 4.5 approximately. Okay, for example 3, we're going to try another, but if you look at this one, you can see that that's not really in the general form. Things are, on different sides of the equation. So we need to be careful that if we have to move something over to the other side of the equation, that we do the opposite. So let's start with the x squared. The x squared is currently on the left, and that's where it needs to stay. So it's going to be x squared. And let's look for the other x. That 22x is on the right side. So we would need to move it over to the left side, which means we would need to subtract it. And then I'm going to remember to put that blank space. The y squared is -y squared, and it's on the right side. So to move it to the left side, we need to add it. Should always end up being a positive y squared. The -24y is on the right side. It needs to move to the left, so we need to add it. Don't forget your blank space. The constant is 241. It is on the left side, and it needs to move to the right side, so we are going to subtract it. And then let's get our blank spaces for our balance. All right, so now we're ready to find the numbers that go in the blank space. So to do that for A, we're going to look at A, which is -22. We are going to divide -22 by 2, which is -11. And then we're going to square -11, which is 121. And that is the number that goes in the blank space. Now we're going to do the same thing for the b value, which is 24. 24 divided by 2 is 12, and 12 squared is 144. That's going to go in our blank values. Now we're ready to factor. So looking at the x portion of it. Okay, it's always going to factor to be x and then half of a squared. So our a value was -22, so half of -22 is -11. Same concept for the y squared portion. It's going to be y and then half of b. So b was 24, so half of that is +12 squared, and then equals, and then we're going to combine -241 with 121 and 144, which is 24. You should never get a negative number at that point, because if this number represents r squared, right, there's no number squared that can be a negative. So now we're ready to identify our center. Remember that we're looking at h and k, and we need to make sure that we do the opposite. So +11, -12. To find the radius, we know that r squared is 24. So if we take the square root of 24, that's going to give us 2√6 for our exact answer, or approximately 4.9. So on one like this, you just need to be very careful and make sure that you watch your signs, especially as you are moving things from the left to the right or the right to the left. All right, so let's try one more, kind of like the one that we just did. So let's start with our x squared, and our x squared is on the left, so it is not going to move, or it's not going to change signs. The 16x is on the left, so it is not going to change signs because it doesn't need to move to the other side. Now let's look at our y squared, which is on the left, so it does not change signs. It stays +y squared. Our 6y is on the left, and it's positive, so it's going to stay the same. And then our constant is already on the right side, so it's going to stay negative 51. Just going to make sure that I have my places so I remember to balance my equation as I add those numbers to the left side. All right, so to find our first blank, we're going to take b, which is negative 16. Positive 16. We're going to divide it by 2, which is 8. And then we're going to square 8, which is 64. Balance it by putting it on both sides of the equation. Now we're going to look at our b value, which is 6. We're going to divide it by 2, which is 3. We're going to square 3, which is 9, and we're going to put that on both sides of the equation to balance it. Now we're ready to factor the x squared plus 16x plus 64. It will always be x plus half of a squared. So since our a was 16 and half of 16 is 8, so it becomes x plus 8 squared. Now let's factor our y squared plus 6y plus 9. We know it's going to be y. Now let's look at b, which is 6, and take half of that, which was positive 3 squared, equals, and then let's add our 3 constants on the right side. So negative 51 plus 64 plus 9 is positive 22. And remember that that is r squared. So when we identify the center, we are looking at the h and k value. Remember, they are going to be the opposite of what they appear. So our center will be negative 8, negative 3. We know that the radius squared is 22, so to find the radius, we square root 22, which is the exact value, and then the approximate value of square root of 22 is 4.7.